So I'll be providing you a brief overview of the statistics of environmental code over the fourth quarter, which is July 1st through September 30th of this last fiscal year. A few trending and forecasting things that we have noticed over that period, and then I'll take any questions you may have. I'm going to go rather quickly just for the sake of time. So just to go over the fourth quarter statistics, as you can see, that top row there in the gold shows the last quarter at 11,613, so 2,000 more than at this same time last year. So showing an increase in the proactive numbers by the code officers. Those are all violations that they have sought out in their patrols through their areas, through their districts. The next set there is the complaints that we have received. So you'll see a slight decrease from this same time last year of about 200. And then as we move forward, it's the contracted and then the citations for that same periods. Year-to-date statistics, I think these are most important here to show you what we have done throughout the entire fiscal year, which identifies an increase of just about 5,000 violations more than last year. The complaints have stayed readily the same, a slight decrease in fiscal year 18-19. About 50% decrease in the contracted properties, but you'll see it kind of levels out with the number of citations issued. So the enforcement activity is still there. It's just in how we're having to approach it, either when it's repeats or other situations like that. This slide here kind of just breaks it out to you by month for the proactive violations identified and the complaints submitted by residents, which it stays pretty consistent. Methods of compliance, I think this is very important to showcase voluntary compliance. 89% for the fourth quarter, which shows that 89% of our residents are complying upon first notice. I mean, and that's fantastic. That's what we want. Contractor abatements at 8% and only 3% citations to get those cases resolved. Case management for the fourth quarter. To provide some comparison here, we have broken out each quarter and then provided your year-to-date average that shows you how long it's taking on average to get one case from its beginning stages through its resolution. And it's taken an average of 22 days to get a case through its entire process. So with, the required 7 to 10 day notice requirement, we feel that that's pretty good with providing extensions and working with our residents. Fourth quarter citation dispositions. So you'll notice that about 60% are still in the docket, so not quite to any kind of resolution, fine, or any state like that, but we do have just under 8% that have already been resolved, 31% that are in progress, and less than 1% that have been dismissed. So, that's showing that our case files are thorough and, prosecutors have everything they need to make sure that they're holding those property owners responsible.
Question.
Yes.
Mayor? Yes. So 7.72% of 337, does that mean, so are those dispositions meaning guilty pleas, cases resolved by plea bargains? Is that what that is?
Yeah, cases resolved, yes, by either plea or by resolution reached between the defendant and the prosecutor.
Including any case tried, guilty, not guilty, any decision by a court or by a jury, correct?
Yes, just not dismissal.
Right, which you've got in the 0.89%,
Yes.
right? So 7.72, how many tickets is that came to final resolution other than dismissal?
That's going to be just, if it's under 10%, under 30 tickets, 20 to 25 tickets.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Top 4 violations here I'm showcasing for you. Nothing unusual for this time period. Our growth period is April through November. But I did notice that there had been an increase in some interest in parking violations. So for the last quarter, I did go ahead and pull that we had 392 violations identified in the fourth quarter for parking violations. This here identifies the fourth quarter sweep that was conducted. It was conducted in Mesquite Park, which is, I believe, Council District 5. The total number of cases was 484 with just under 1,200 violations identified.
Could I interrupt you for just
Sure.
a second? Would you go back to the parking violations again? I had a specific question. How are we doing with parking violations where folks park up in the middle of the yard? Do we have any data on that specifically?
Well, those are the ones I'm referring to specifically. It's parking violations,
Okay.
parking on an unimproved surface.
Okay.
Or the 390.
Versus being in the driveway and just having, being
The inoperable
or-
vehicle, yeah, that's a separate type of violation.
Good. Great. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem.
A question? An unapproved surface is what?
An unimproved surface would be gravel, grass, dirt, pavers. Vehicles cannot be on those surfaces.
So if it's not concreted or asphalt, as we have in some of our older sections, they have some asphalt. If it's just gravel, then you're not supposed to park on it.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I just provide just a quick clarification? There are opportunities for a resident to have a permitted surface besides concrete. You have to go through a permit process, and there are certain specifications in which we will allow it. But most of the time, putting gravel down on a dirt surface does not qualify or anything like that. So just to have a general statement, everything has to be on concrete is not accurate.
Motorized vehicles in general, trailers can be on gravel with a certain depth and bordered.
And a question with that, Mr. City Manager, perhaps, what about, we know we've got some neighborhoods where there are older properties that have always had gravel driveways. How do we normally deal with that?
If the structure was built without a concrete driveway, we provide allowances for that. It is really, we're going after people who are parking beyond what their driveway would be unless they have a permit to expand that with an alternate surface besides concrete. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Please proceed.
So this is just a summary of the violations identified in the top 5 during that sweep, and this is just a map that identifies all the properties that were done within that area. We always like the opportunity to showcase any successes. This is Rose Lane. This was a property that was a joint effort between building inspections and code enforcement. We dealt with some home occupations, some outside storage, some nuisance things, some, illegal structures and whatnot, and we're very proud to showcase the after photos there that showed full compliance of those violations. Another property here on Windmill, just high grass, trash, and debris, just to showcase that, simple lawn mowing and some picking up of some scattered debris makes a notable difference to the conditions of our neighborhoods. I thought this was important to showcase, especially because we do have an upcoming class for our code ambassadors, but if you notice on the gold, they have nearly doubled their activity over the last fourth quarter from this same one. So we like to see that they are being more participative and active and out there in our community. We are currently providing them continuing education. They are achieving higher compliance rates, and their volunteer hours for the last quarter were at 225. Vacant property maintenance, I'm going to go to the next slide just to summarize. 680 total properties were sent initial notices to maintain in the fourth quarter, which is the first step of the vacant property reoccurring maintenance process. 148 of those properties have been initiated with the first contract, which is the second step, and then 62 properties have already been placed on the reoccurring maintenance list to be done every 3 weeks. Now, we have noticed a rise in the number of properties with active permits and with more voluntary compliance. So hopefully for the new quarter of this fiscal year, we can show you some data as to what those numbers are reflecting. And just a quick opportunity to showcase our home program, which is volunteer and donation driven. We did get 6 referrals in the last fiscal year. 1 is still pending, but 5 have been completed. These 2 that you see here were both on Darren Street and Rollingwood Hills. This was just a landscape here, and then the other one was a paint that you can see where made notable differences, and these residents were very appreciative of what we were able to provide for them. And at this time, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, comments, council? I have one question. How are we doing with regards to those residents who receive a notice and they have concerns or they're not sure how they'll go about doing what needs to be done? There's a time issue. How do you feel like we're doing in terms of them making use of contacting that code inspector and them having a dialogue back and forth? How are we doing on that?
I think we're doing fairly well. I have not received any escalation of calls myself. I do, keep regular contact with the manager as well, just to make sure that that's not occurring. So, they kind of standing an official rule, 24 hours, make sure we're returning our phone calls, giving extensions wherever they're warranted, and working with our residents as best we can.
And you said the key thing is returning the calls, and I don't hear a lot of concerns, but occasionally I hear a concern of, we wanted to comply, but we didn't know what to do, and we left a couple of emails and called, and I'm sure on those days it's because that inspector may have just been overloaded. I rode out with them before, so I know what that's like a little bit, but I would encourage us to continue to return those calls or the emails as quick as we can, or if for some reason we couldn't, work with them because of that little time lapse or whatever. But
Absolutely.
We're seeing real results, and I'm real proud. And, Mr. Green, please.
Yeah, so I guess the one question I got with you, it all relates to consistency, okay? That's like the number one thing I hear about our code enforcement. What kind of programs do we have in place for continuing education, calibration of our code enforcement officers, things like that, to make sure that we're being consistent and fair across the board? Because, that's the most frustrating thing, I think, for a homeowner is, one code inspector may go out and, everything's great at your property, and the next one comes out and finds something that the other one didn't see. What do we do to, I guess, make sure that's not happening?
I think it is, a constant training, making sure that they're working closely with the field supervisors, making sure that our standard operating procedures are staying current and active, and that they're being checked regularly, that the code officers are familiar enough with the ordinances and everything that they're enforcing, that everybody should be able to see the same thing when they're going out on any given property.
How often do we do the training or calibrations? Do we do that quarterly? How often we do that kind of stuff?
Well, I know we have regular meetings. There's different topics that are picked up, that are done at each of those meetings to discuss, if there's a hot button item that's been hitting, or we're having particular issues with one thing, we'll bring those up at those monthly staff meetings. Now, through their licensure, they are required to have a certain number of continuing education hours as code officers in general. I know that several of the code officers just attended a day-long training in Richardson that went over a lot of regular nuisance-type violations, how to identify those, and how to most consistently enforce those, and offering consistent enforcement.
Okay, I appreciate that. Great feedback on the report here. I'm glad to see that we're out there being active. Just want to make sure we're being fair to everybody. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay, we've got about 4 minutes. That's unprecedented. So take a 4-minute break before we get started. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Good work.